Economic growth is growth of GDP over time. We can see it through these two graphs.
This is how the PPC curve has shifted outwards from point B to point E. That shows that the increase in GDP and the growth in the economy. And in the second graph, which shows us the long run aggregate supply curve, which has shifted from here, from YF1 to YF2. The Y shows the real GDP, the x-axis. It shows us the GDP, and we can see that it has increased by shifting to the right. And we can see a couple of positive consequences of economic growth. For example, starting with how the increase in GDP increases the national stance of the country between other countries. It increases living standards.
So tax revenues get higher, so governments can spend more money on merit goods. So this increases our life standards.
Yeah, and merit goods are all goods that are good to the society. However, the society doesn't want to spend money on it, so the government has to spend money on it, right? And education and intellectual level of society increases because the government can now spend more money in education and other things that will help the society rise and the country's stance between other countries rise too. We have an example, which is
Our country,
Turkey, the country that we're living in right now. 15 years ago,
yeah, Turkey was like standard living standards was like too low. You can't even use a car easily because of the infrastructure. Turkey needed infrastructure.
yeah. So when the government started improving and getting into the recovery phase during their economy, people started spending more money because their wages are getting higher and goods started becoming more expensive. However, it doesn't affect people because wages are increasing too, so that shows how the living standards are rising. So that's a real life example nowadays.
Negative consequences. These are poor standards of living for individuals to sacrifice too much time for work, structural employment changes within sectors, green GDP, negative externalities.
Alright, so we can see, for example, this picture shows a group of workers in China. They're requesting like help to double the salary, and however, Chinese economy is a very good example of a growing economy. But nowadays, people in China they work so much and they don't get paid enough. So we can see that that's a sign of poor living standards. So in that case, it's a negative externality, and the the growth in China, the economic growth in China, is bad. It's not good. And structural employment and changes within sectors. Not everyone gets the same amount of money. The money is not divided like equally. That's a thing that we have to look at pretty close in order to see how the economic growth could be very bad sometimes. And we can see that this negative consequence could affect the whole society because society is usually made of layers, and the sectors, different sectors will get different amounts of money. And another thing we want to talk about, negative consequence, is green GDP. Like negative externalities if too much industrialization
Yeah,
is there.
cause harm to the environment.
Yeah, so the ecosystem will get disrupted.
Yeah, so the life standards gets
Even
lower. So people started to hate their own country because of the
Yeah.
environment, pollution.
A real world example is obviously China. For example, in China, we watched a documentary during class which shows us how in China right now there is so much pollution, and that when they count the green GDP, it's actually much lower than the real GDP because So many factories are being built so fast, right?
Yeah.
Rivers are destroyed.
Rivers are destroyed. Everywhere is in pollution.
Trees.
Trees got cut and they destroyed.
Yeah, so like when looking at it that way, we can see that economic growth like really has some bad negative externalities depending on the government or the way the government improves its economy. You know, because for example, in China, so many people work for so little money. Like, however, their economy is the best in the world probably right now. You know, they don't have economical problems.
I guess.
Not like the ones other countries are facing right now, like in the European Union. You know, they don't have any problems like that. However, the people are not living comfortable lives because they're giving so much up in order to work.
Yeah.
Alright, so for our evaluation, we think that economic growth can be both good and bad at the same time. For example, in this picture, you can see how the Chinese people are living a bad life. The guy has his arm hurt, he's not enjoying his life, so the living standards of individuals go down. However,
On the other hand, a family enjoys with their lunch, I guess, yeah, lunch, and they have high living standards, not like the Chinese workers, and they're happy because of this.
yeah, so we can see the negative consequences of like economic growth. For example, in China here, the people they're like tortured, they're like in prison. In prison, they have to work the whole time. However, like we can just see this family enjoying this time, drinking beer,
Drinking
having
beer, iced tea, beer.
yeah, having a good time. So, like as we said at the beginning, we actually think that it can be good and bad in the same time because you know, like you should equate the living standards with the economic growth that's going on because you might have very good economy, but you can't enjoy yourself with the money that you get. But we can see that these people in China don't get money and they don't enjoy themselves at all.
Yeah.